Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It is Jeremy Werner live at Williams Arena in Minnesota, and Derek Piper back in Illinois as the Illini find a way to bounce back. It's kind of going back and forth, back and forth. You feel good or not feel good about Illinois basketball, but you feel good after tonight, 95-74. We'll talk about a different starting lineup, a different kind of approach to the lineup, maybe a smaller lineup as well, a different style of play a little bit in this one as Illinois goes more inside out and doesn't rely on the three-pointer as much, but they shot better from the three. So we'll talk about that. But Derek Piper, it all starts with the five-star freshman. Yes, we're going to count Kasparas. Jakucionis is a five-star freshman, along with Will Riley, as they combine for 51 points tonight. Will Riley, 27 points, his most against a high major team. Career-high 9 rebounds, career-high 7 assists. Kasparas Jakucionis, 24 points, big bounce-back performance for him. Said the wrist feels great, but you saw him in attack mode, really in transition as well. Boy, Brad Underwood went the one-and-done route, and both those guys looked like one-and-dones, Derek. And it's kind of a reminder, if you get those guys going at the same time, Illinois is really dangerous. And this felt like one of the first times this year we saw them going at the same time, and boy, it's fun.
Yeah, no, that's where I was going to go, is that we've been talking about it recently. When will you have both of those guys clicking together? And I tweeted this later in the game and just continue to see what Will Riley's doing. It's felt like, because we saw what KJ was established to be over the first 2.5 months of this season, one of the next steps, regardless of all the other stuff that's gone on with Illinois, to like unlocking your ceiling, is to get Will Riley to click and to be comfortable and to be himself and to find this mode that he's found here down the stretch of the last couple of weeks. So for him to go the way he's been going and showing no signs of letting up, only giving Brad more reason to double down and triple down on minutes and usage and putting the ball in his hands, and he's continuing to make really good decisions. And then for KJ to look like KJ again and to make shots and be able to just play with a lot of confidence, going to the basket, hitting threes, and just kind of seemed to have a swagger about him tonight. Seemed to get that back, and just what a show between those two. You can see why KJ's where he's at and why Will probably at this rate will trend back into the first round. I know, mock draft expert, but that looks like it's very well within reason. And this is a big part of the equation to Illinois ceiling, which we've talked about throughout. And when those guys are doing what they're capable of doing, Illinois is pretty dangerous. So
what I'm going to write about after this game, Derek, is Brad. We got to talk to him, Scott Ritchie and I, after this game, and he started to talk about the one and done and the approach he went through. And with this team, he had to be patient. He just kind of had to teach himself that, hey, last year I had all these old guys. I had to realize that, hey, this is a process for him. This is the first time they've gone through a lot of these things. A lot of them as college players, but also them as a whole team, right? He said the hardest part was some of these older guys that are on the team, Trey White and Kylan Boswell and Ben Humrickhouse. They've been through some of these things, but not with guys like this, not with guys this talented or with this group. So and figuring out roles, this team had to figure that out, but also Kasparas had to deal with adversity, right? Will had to deal with adversity early on. And now those guys, you can tell, are getting a little bit more mature, a little bit more mentally tough, a little bit more understanding of what the day-to-day is kind of a pseudo-pro here, right? I mean, they're basically pros, but they're all learning that. But the reason Brad Underwood did this, Derek, is because he saw what UConn had, right? And he saw that's a talent I need. And sure, Terrence Shannon was one of those, but you got to get more of them. And this is his most talented team. And he said, I wanted that challenge. I've never been able to get one and done talents. And I want to challenge myself with, can I coach them up? Can I go through a season to get them to the end and reach that potential? Because at the end, you need Will Riley doing what he did, going off on a heater. You need Kasparas Jakucionis being unstoppable off the bounce, right? So I found that really interesting because Brad's never coached a team like this, right? And they're going to go through ups and downs. We kind of understood all of that, but can tonight be the first step towards figuring that all out? We'll see, because Minnesota's not a great team. Really, one player, you stop them and you feel pretty good about it. And they did a great job against Dawson Garcia. But it'll be interesting to see if they can turn the corner, because the silver lining of a bad month might have been Will Riley, the emergence of him as a primary playmaker. And then if you get Kasparas Jakucionis out of that, hitting that freshman wall, get him over that wall, they're dangerous. They're dangerous. Now we'll see if they can do it back-to-back games.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The good news is that we have a growing sample size for Will. Like he goes on his heater at Michigan State, who's the number one defense in Big Ten play, and obviously right there at the top of the standings and doing what they're doing. And a couple of different reference points to the Ohio State game. It's been more than just obviously a one-time occurrence. Nebraska, Rutgers, they're lower in the pecking order in the Big Ten, but still I like the consistency that's building for him. He's had the last 4 games at least 16 points, and obviously goes over 20 in a couple of those, including tonight. KJ, Tennessee really for the first 2.5 months, where it was really the only team that I felt like really bothered him and took him so far out of sorts that the trade-off, he's made mistakes. Like he's turned the ball over at different points, but that was the one where, goes, I think 5 for 15 from the field, 7 turnovers, that the downside didn't end up as a net positive. So he's obviously got a lot of experience under his belt in this season, has learned a lot. I think there were points of growth tonight, Jeremy. Like for Will Riley to take a 5th-year, 215-pound wing to the rim and play through him and finish that earlier in the first half, like that was a play he's not making earlier on in the season. For KJ to get the Dawson Garcia switch, which he had a beautiful spin move once, taking him to the rim, and then we often see him when he's on the wing isolated with a big, it's play into the step back every time. Well, this time he kind of deked it and goes by him and finishes around the basket. So that's freshmen that are growing, that are getting more comfortable. You can see just the contrast between Will a month ago or whatever it might have been earlier in the year to now is really stark. And KJ, we've seen him, we know enough of what he can be and what he is when he's right. And the great thing is that it looked like it tonight. We'll get into it more going forward, but yes, doing it against Minnesota, who's 17th of 18 teams in defensive efficiency in league play, much easier than when you're about to face UCLA, hottest team in the Big Ten, top 10 nationally defense, and then Michigan State again, the top ranked defense in the Big Ten this week. So, but you got the ball moving in the right direction, build confidence, and for a little while, I know we were talking about this amongst ourselves before the game. You extinguished, not fully, but at least pushed down some fire, some angst down the road, and calm some people a little bit, probably.
Yeah, can we can stop with the NCAA tournament worries for a moment, at the very least, because this right now is probably a 6 seed or something like that, and it'd be a dangerous one. But yeah, like what I love seeing is those two combined 4 of 8 from 3. They're not just jacking it up. Like Will had a heater and he took a couple, made one, missed one that you don't mind when he's feeling that good. But just they were in attack mode. I loved Kasparas really pushing it in transition. I thought he got to the free throw line a couple times, got to the rim a couple times, just because he saw Minnesota wasn't running back and he was one-on-one and got a guy on skates and he attacked. Will did that a few times as well. But I do want to ask you, Derek, like Illinois shot 16 threes. That's their lowest by far. By 4. Like by 4 3-pointers, and that was a couple games ago. So we've seen it in halves, Illinois come out and be like, oh, we're going to really attack the rim. And it's usually in the second half, right? But from the start, this team was in attack mode. Brad goes big. He goes to Perez, who didn't have a good night tonight, but goes Tomislav. We're getting to hit how gutsy his performance was. And Ben Rickhouse at the 3. And I know it upset everybody. Don't worry, Will Riley played 31 minutes tonight. He played 30 minutes the other night. He's averaging 30 minutes off the bench. So he's basically a starter. But you went with that big lineup, I thought, to really get rebounds. Like it was just, hey, let's dominate on the glass from the tip off. But also you just got in attack mode. You weren't settling for threes, and your guards were attacking. I thought Kylan did a good job of that. Tommy was an initiator there, but it finally felt like, okay, let's not have an abundance of threes. And Brad said after the game, it's part of what Minnesota gave them. But he also said it's about, hey, we wanted to make the attempt to play inside out and get the ball in the paint and then kick it out for quality step into threes rather than contested sidestep, step back threes. And you look at it, and look what happens. They shoot 9 of 16 from 3. It's the first time they shot over 40% from 3 since the Oregon game. That was 10 games ago.
It's crazy. Yeah, and I credit them that they had a good game plan. I know Brad is going to continue to really still poor confidence into the 3-point shooting. And I'm not saying that he shouldn't, but ultimately it felt like in watching it that it was a very game plan that was very geared towards that, and they wanted to do that early on. And I think that Tommy's presence out there, obviously, when he's not, things change in terms of the way that people can guard the paint and everything like that. So when he extends out to 3, I thought they had good cutting actions to get guys going to the basket. Tommy with the ball in his hands, and you could find Will on a cut. You could find Kylan, and I think that they ran some different designs to get that action going. And like you said, I mean, Kylan just flat out. Kylan was like a halfback, like just going in there and throwing stiff arms almost sometimes, initiating more contact than really he was absorbing.
Can I ask you something, Derek? Just from your view, because I saw it here, and from the vantage point we had tonight, we were pretty high up, but I liked it because we could see a lot of the court. Kasparas was off the ball a lot tonight, especially in that first half. And it felt like it just took a little bit of the load off him, to where he got more of his burst in the half court, to where he didn't have to create everything and let Kylan, be the initiator. Sometimes Tommy, a lot of times Will, though, as well, when those two were playing together. What did you make of that? Because then he started to be the primary guy again on the ball in the second half, and you saw him take over. But what would you make of that little wrinkle? Because he certainly seemed to be playing off the ball more.
Yeah, it was something they did in the second half against Rutgers, where KJ only takes one shot, I think, after halftime in that one ultimately. And they've been pouring more onto the plate of Will as far as the ability to initiate the offense and make plays. I'm still really impressed by just the poise that he has, the vision he has, what he sees sometimes to within the flow of a play to see, maybe Jake Davis on the opposite side of the basket, and he finds him there. But there's no doubt about it. Yeah, that KJ has been more off the ball, and whether that's just something that is supposed to ease some of the pressure on him, take some of the workload off of him in terms of, being fresh and whatnot. I know some people were talking about he didn't have the sleeve tonight, which is there any indication of more freedom there? Is he feeling better there ultimately? Whatever that might be, I'm not sure. But
what can I tell you?
Yeah,
because Def had a 1999 super chat. We'll take your super chats throughout this as well. Thank you, Def. Always appreciate your generosity here, man. I spent December in a walking boot, mostly due to tendonitis. It hurts. After weeks struggling with his wrist often braced and wrapped, I'm sure that's no coincidence. KJ suddenly looked great again tonight without the wrap. KJ talked about it. Like, he didn't have the wrap for the first time since he suffered that injury. He said he felt great, so he just decided to ditch it. And he decided that a couple days ago. Kind of coincided with Brad talking to him just about, putting a mistake in the past. Like, he's living in that mistake a little bit too much, which I'm not surprised with an 18-year-old. But I asked him, I followed up, I said, has that been bothering you even the last couple of games? He said, well, not really. It's been more mental for him to get over it. So I'm wondering if shedding that kind of got out of his mind that, I had a hurt wrist. So I think whatever it is, whether it's 100% now, which it sounds like it is, or if it's 100% mentally as well as physically. So I think that helps. I also think the quality of shot he got was a little bit better, and he was just attacking the rim. I mean, he only shot 4 threes out of 14 shots. Got some free throw line 6 times. That's what I like to see.
No doubt. Yeah. Being able to draw contact. Minnesota, not a big rim protection team, so that helps it out. But even having a 6'11" guy like Garcia that then has to be pulled away from the basket with Tommy is something that helps the guards. If you go back and watch, I was just noticing in the moment that a lot of those takes to the rim, there wasn't some big guy waiting to challenge that shot. It was a lot of open lane, and that's the spacing, that's the 5 out that Brad envisioned that he wanted. And for Illinois to really take advantage of that instead of chuck a little bit too much from 3 and get a little 3 happy and whatnot, which we've seen. And ultimately that'll have to carry over against, more athleticism, more toughness, more strength, which the likes of UCLA and Michigan State will have. But the talent just overwhelmed Minnesota tonight. And KJ has a ton of it. Obviously, Will has a ton of it. And, but yeah, certainly for him, I think it's important in general, health-wise or not, confidence-wise or not, for Illinois to progress the way they should. They need multiple guys as far as initiators to take that pressure off of KJ. It might be a matchup that, we saw Tennessee have Meshack put on him, and just that's a really, really good defender. Can your other guy make enough plays with him, or maybe it's scheme, they're blitzing him in ball screens. Kylan hasn't really been who you hoped maybe as that secondary, but Will's becoming that. Tommy's been that, and those are big things going forward for this team.
Let's talk about Ivisic. 18 points, 11 rebounds, 8 of 9 from the field, hit both of his threes. Did have 4 turnovers tonight, but also had 2 assists, a block, a steal. Thought he was really impactful defensively. What he did on Garcia was really impressive. Garcia tonight, 4 of 14, 12 points. This is an all Big Ten caliber player, and Illinois was able to shut him down. I thought that was part scheme, too. I mean, I know it's really frustrating when a guy like Odukale, just goes off for his season high in threes. But Illinois just said, we'll let him shoot jumpers and we'll stop Garcia, because if Garcia goes off, then we have no chance. I mean, the trade-off was Odukale had 22 points tonight, but at the same time, it worked for him. But I just thought Ivisic showed a lot of toughness. He did not look like he was moving well. We were watching him. I was on Tomic watch the entire time in pregame. I thought Dre and Trey looked better than he did. And they were battling illness. Just looked stiff. And then he kept going, kept warming up, and loosened up. And all of a sudden, we know he's starting and guts it out again, Derek. 33 minutes from Ivisic. And Brad, what was the analogy he used? He called it like a Cabernet grape, which I'm not a wino like Brad Underwood. So I don't know how big a Cabernet grape is. But KJ said he saw it. And he said his ankle did not look beautiful. That's how Kasparas said it. So I heard that thing was really swollen up. Today was really the first time he worked out on it today. So since the Rutgers game. So he gutted it out, man. And not only did he gut it out, he had his 9th double-double of the season. And again, we just see what he does for everybody else is the floor stretcher, the rim protector, the initiator offensively. He's just so valuable to this team. And he's tough, man. He's a really tough player.
Such a big piece, and yeah, a tough dude, no doubt about it. To think back to the fact that he had mono, and you hear that his throat was so swollen he could barely breathe against Michigan State, and Rez gets in foul trouble, and he just ends up playing 25 minutes or whatever it ultimately was, and does it because he wants to be there for the team, and that was something that he goes back into the Rutgers game, even though it was hurting him, it was bothering him. He knew that they needed him, and then tonight to gut that thing out is a big deal because he is that difference maker. 2 assists, but he probably had 3 times that in terms of passes that led to maybe the next pass to score, or just, again, obviously his positioning on the floor to open up opportunities for other guys is just those things you can't even sometimes quantify how many there are. Then make threes the way he did. That's great to see because, he didn't against Ohio State when he returned. And he mentioned, hey, had just started shooting for the first time in 3 weeks right before that game, and hasn't been above 30% from 3 in Big Ten play, but we know he's very capable. When he's making those, he's all the more tough to guard. Back to the basket too. He had some nice post moves against Rutgers. Brad mentioned, and it was obvious to everybody, I think, that they wanted to go to that more if he didn't roll the ankle. He even showed that a little bit tonight, and I like that angle for Illinois just to kind of be able to go to that layer if they want to. So he means a ton, and it is. We almost take it for granted how many times he ends up with a double-double, right? Like, we were like, with Kofi was like very much emphasized, and obviously the number there was ridiculous, but I don't know. It's not something I thought he would be in that range almost every night, but he is.
I also want to shout out Ben Hummerkaus. I think he's playing well for the most part here recently. 9 points, 2 of 4 from 3, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. Scott and I looked at the box score. I don't know where those 4 assists come from, but the ball was popping, man. So kudos to Ben Hummerkaus. I thought he had a strong performance. Boswell's stat line doesn't drop off, jump out to you, but I thought he played really well. But really short bench outside of Riley tonight. Jake Davis, 2nd most minutes off the bench with 15. Dre Gibbs-Allhorn, obviously sick, only played 4 minutes. Biggest surprise, Trey White played, 12 seconds, had 2 fouls. We thought he'd be good for tonight, but how do you take Will Riley off the court? Jake Davis was playing well tonight too, so it'll be interesting. Brad, I asked him about Trey. He said he's barely practiced. It was hard to get into a rhythm, so we'll see. But I thought Jake played well, 7 points, a couple rebounds, a couple putbacks for him. I thought Will Riley battled on one and got him for one of those putbacks. But it's interesting, Derek. It just feels like Now you double down on the talent, right? Rather than just guys with experience, because it is shown that your team is best when it's Tommy Ivisic, Kasparas, Jakucionis, and Will Riley is the main parts of your team. And I think Brad with Boswell, with Merez, who didn't have a great game tonight, like you got to ride your young talent now.
Right. Yeah. Will Riley moves the needle. He just ultimately does more than a higher version of Trey. But we've seen, I mean, we've seen Trey have really good games, obviously with rebounding and with cuts and different things that he can do. But Will's facilitating, bucket getting is just super high level. And to have him confident and have him feeling free to go make plays and take pressure off KJ is just the most important thing for this team. And we hope that obviously Trey gets back to feeling healthy. I'm bummed for him because Maryland was the game him and Will were questionable for, and ultimately they both are available and play. So if he's still sick or not feeling 100% right, and that's obviously been something that's lingered or another thing popped up with him, he'll be important for this team because he is, again, rebounder, physical, can be a good cutter, but Will should get the bulk of the opportunity, or just you think about how much you want Will on the court, and then you kind of pivot off of and distribute from there. Ben tonight, a couple of those assists, booty ball, and then making a play out of it, and that's something that is totally different. And that's an adjustment that Brad's made, because there was a time in December, I think, that he's like, you know what? I wouldn't care if he didn't take another 2 the rest of the year. And now it's like, okay, let's play in some back downs. He's showed good patience. He's got good touch. And then a couple of times, I can't remember who he found. He had like a turnaround and then hit a guy on the opposite corner and got an assist there. So I thought he played pretty well, and that's good to see. Again, another action that they can go to, and a matchup thing. They get a guard on him. Minnesota's backcourt's not very big, and they can exploit that.
You're starting to find some matchup hunting things. I'm going to get out of here because there's somebody else freaking vacuuming while we're doing this. It was quiet in here until we started this. But they are matchup hunting a little bit with Ben and those booty balls. When he plays the 3, you can do that a little bit more. And he's starting to look more comfortable doing that. He's making some of those turnarounds. He's not Marcus Damask, but at least you can go to that a couple times if you need to. Also, you're matchup hunting with Will, because as his handle has gotten a little tighter, Derek, you get a smaller guard on him. They can't stop him. Like those runners around the rim, like he's finishing through contact. He's being able to handle that contact a little bit more.
No doubt about it. Yeah. Will is having that 6'8" size, and we saw him, especially in that second half against Ohio State, being able to finish over smaller defenders, and he's putting himself in good positions to elevate and show good touch there. And that's something you really want him to be able to do, is to get a smaller guy on him, and he can just elevate over for a jump shot or go to the rack as well. So, and then if you maybe against more of a slower footed 4, he's a guy that can go by him, and that's something that you could look at as well. So, yeah, Will as an on-ball guy is just a tough matchup in general, especially when he's making good decisions, which he really has been able to do. And I'm sure UCLA, Kobe Johnson's one of the best defenders in the Big Ten, if not the country. I'm sure he'll probably see KJ primarily, but you're going to see athleticism, turnover-seeking defenses, especially UCLA, and you hope that those guys play composed at that. But right now they're confident, and yeah, they can hunt out some different things, which was a huge characteristic. I mean, that was like really the core of their offense last year, which was phenomenal. And it took a while for this to really materialize with this offense, but maybe that's something that's really going to pay dividends over the last month of the regular season.
All right, we'll go for a little bit more. We'll take some of your questions here on the live YouTube channel. We appreciate all you guys for joining us here late. But Derek, here we go. You kind of tread water here, right? You've won 3 out of your last 5 games, if you want to look at it that way. Obviously disappointing to lose on the road at Nebraska and Rutgers, because I thought with this schedule you really had a chance to kind of get back into this race a little bit. I don't know if anybody's going to catch Purdue and Michigan State with the way they're playing. Illinois obviously has way too many losses for that. But that's in the past now. But you have 2 home games here where you can really help your NCAA tournament resume. 2 quad 1 home games against really good teams. UCLA, one of the hottest teams in the Big Ten after losing 4 straight games. they have rattled off 7 straight wins. And I looked at Bart Torvik the other day, number 5 team in the country since they started that streak, and offensively and defensively they've been doing it. But we know Cronin plays tough defense, so obviously that matchup against Sky Clark, and then you get Michigan State back, and obviously KJ didn't play much in that game. The key is obviously to continue to be healthy and get Tommy 100%, get everyone else healthy from the illnesses and all of that. But what a huge week ahead where you feel like you can get two of, if you can get both of those, Derek, you feel great, right? And you feel like you're kind of making up for some bad losses here. Not bad losses, but losses that you didn't think Illinois would take on the road. If you get one of them, you feel like, hey, that's a really quality win that'll look good on the resume.
Yeah, they're both quad ones. They're both ones that you get and you don't worry about them standing up on Selection Sunday for sure. And I think that as we've looked at this and, you see 6 seed projection, I know that Brad Evans going into this weekend had him as a 7 seed. I imagine you're kind of in that 6 seed range, and this stopped the bleeding, really. This stopped the spiral that was possible. If they lose tonight, then we're having an entirely different conversation about what could possibly happen down the stretch of this thing. But now you get back home. If you sweep the homestand, then you're feeling great, and you're opening things back up to higher levels of taking off in the tournament. Whether that's a 4 seed, 5 seed, that floor might get closer to that point. And then, of course, there is the possibility that this team, who maybe is still the most talented team in the Big Ten, goes to the Big Ten tournament and runs off 3, 4 in a row, whatever it might be, 3 in a row, I think. But ultimately, yeah, UCLA, Sky Clark's been playing a lot better. Kobe Johnson's a really good 2-way player, definitely great defender. They got a 7'3" big man from overseas, and Mara, who's been better of late for them, and a guy that can score around the basket. And Eric Daly, a transfer from Oklahoma State's a skilled front court piece. So they will try to disrupt you. They're number 2 in the country in turnover rate defensively. So that's something that is alarming for Illinois, who's went through a lot of those struggles as far as taking care of the ball and whatnot. But it's a see what you're made of week. Michigan State, I know it's not the ISON, it's not Tom in his home building, or maybe he has more sway with the refs. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Jace Richardson went nuts today for them, about 30, and they play really good defense. So 2 very tough games, winnable, and we'll say a lot about how you should feel going into the home stretch.
It's a great way to put it, Derek. That sounds like a column coming up. See what you got. See what you're made of week. I love that. It certainly is. It's like, okay, go through your ups and downs. Let's be honest, it's Minnesota. Like, I know they've had a couple good wins, but you're just way better than that team. But the way you played, who shined tonight, like the style you play, like that stuff feels good. Like, this is a really good feel-good win. But now turn it into something. Because I feel like if they play the way they did tonight, they'd beat UCLA. I feel like if they play the way they did tonight at home against Michigan State, have a great chance to win. So even with the opponent, the way you beat them, the way you controlled this game, the way you kind of dominated it, it's going to be different against obviously different talent. But I just like the way they play. And now consistency. That's what this team has to find in February and into March, is find some consistency, because you can have one game and beat a really good team. How do you follow it up 2 days later in the NCAA tournament, Derek? Like that's what makes a run. And this team was built to make a run. Now you got to find some consistency that gives you confidence they can do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think a big thing about that is having more discipline. Like, Minnesota didn't really test that tonight. They didn't have the athletes, the talent to really test your discipline. And I think that when you see more of that, that's something that stood out here recently, where Illinois is making too many prior to tonight. Tonight was great. Undisciplined mistakes, offensively with turnovers, shot selection, and then fouling. Like Perez Johnson, you don't want him in foul trouble. You want to be able to not put people on the line and make mistakes as far as that goes. So that's a big part, I think, going forward, is can this team grow up in that area? And then, yes, try to still have the emphasis of going to the rim, because I just feel like that is something that can make you more consistent. And the 3-point shooting can come along with it. Like, when you have a night tonight where you're getting the downhill action, then the 3 looks are a little bit different, a little more in rhythm, maybe for the right guys. And that's the way it goes. So Hopefully it's just a shot in the arm of confidence, maybe a little bit of a release of a tad of pressure, going into tonight. Just things were snowballing, it felt like a little bit, and maybe that helps them settle back in at home. But also you gotta continue to keep your foot on the gas and keep hammering away and know what this means, because this week is massive.
Great question by Illini Bubba. What do you think the fan reaction will be with Sky?
That's a good question. I don't think it'll be Hunter Dickinson vitriol or anything like that. I mean,
can I be honest? I don't think he was here long enough to get a reaction. Right? It was exciting when he committed. He's turned into what I thought he'd be as a player. I think he's a good player. But he was here for 12 games and then gone. And then since then, Illinois has had really good players. So it didn't feel like a huge, massive loss. It was for maybe that season, but he wasn't playing all that well in that season. I don't know if he's fixing anything on that season. So I just don't know if there's a ton of bad blood there or a ton of feelings regardless. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't think it'll be super nasty. I think he'll get booed. I think Probably. People will have jokes for him, whether it's somebody brings a suitcase and says, "Hey, we pack it up middle of the season, just walk our way back to Los Angeles," or whatever it might be. I don't know. Hey, I know Tobey Maguire too. Whatever it might be.
Spider-Man. Who's dressed up as Spider-Man in the cross?
Yeah. But like you said,
like Fedigator said, it ain't gonna be Chester Frazier bumping Eric. Like, there's not that level of vitriol. Like when Hunter Dickinson walked into the arena, man. Shout out Coleman Hawkins beating him yet again, by the way. So like when Hunter Dickinson walked into the arena, it was different, right?
Brad Davison was bad. There are some villains out there that just.
What if Indiana would have come to Illinois? If Indiana would have come to Illinois, what would Luke Goody's reaction have been?
Man,
because there's so much love for Luke Goody and what he did for this team, but he left for Indiana. I don't blame him for that, but like other Illinois fans would.
I think there'd be a lot of heckling. I don't know. It would be all
especially with the way that season's gone.
Yeah, like if there was a return game, because remember, like right after the Indiana game, of course, there was like, hey, Luke maybe took a cheap shot or two, or whatever it might have been. Like, I think as the season's played out, like it's been more of like we've had time for the steam to cool off there, and also like, hey, Luke would be nice on this team with his 3-point shooting. Then you just feel bad a little bit for a winning player going through what they're going through in Bloomington. But that's an interesting question. He might have faced more because he's more of a recognizable. There's going to be people in the Crush now that weren't here in 22-23 that don't know who Sky Clark is, probably.
Barely, right? We barely interviewed him when he was here. TK, I like all the former Illini except maybe Curbelo. Bring Dane Danger back for a standing ovation. Yeah, Dane would definitely get a standing ovation. No one blames him for going to Memphis, getting money, and playing at a level I think he's obviously succeeding at. Just interesting to think about.
Curbelo's a nice dude, but loose cannon on the court, and I get he's a polarizing. He was when he played at Illinois. Was a polarizing character.
Jaden Epps would get booed. TB says.
Not as much as Ed Cooley, but yes, he would.
All right. Any final thoughts there before we get out of here?
I just it's interesting. I'm glad we can put to bed and know that there's still like worst case scenarios that could happen. But I hated even writing it, like going into this game, that, hey, if Illinois loses to Minnesota, then we maybe do have to open up the possibility that this team doesn't go to the tournament. I think based on just the eye test and just what this team should do at a medium outcome or even like a below average outcome, they should be safe. They should ultimately be in the tournament. And tonight, go ahead.
Yeah, Ken Palm has them at 20-11 projected, 12-8. That's like a 4 or 5 seed potentially, 6 at worst. But if you lost this one, you're thinking, which game do they win? How many games do they have left? Maybe Iowa and what other ones? But like we said the last podcast, like I felt good about them coming into this game against this opponent, and then like this week, I think they'll get one. I still think like this team when it plays well, is going to beat basically every other team in the Big Ten, right? Purdue's different, maybe, but I can see Illinois beating Purdue. I can see them losing to Purdue. I can see him beating Wisconsin on the road. I can see him beating UCLA or Michigan State. Duke, I don't know about that. That's a lot of length. That's a lot of athleticism. That's a lot of skill.
Clemson got him tonight, though.
Michigan almost lost to Indiana. I love that Michigan team, but they find ways to lose the last 10 minutes of every game. Like, they blow these huge leads because they're so reliant on Trey Donaldson. I love that front court, but it's Trey Donaldson or bust, it feels like, in that back court. So they all got flaws, man. Illinois is as talented as any of them. They're just younger than a lot of these teams. For
sure. Yeah, it's a super challenging stretch, and you don't want it to be where, KJ's struggles continued and that Tommy was in a situation where he was going to miss, and then a lot of questions there. So some of the just things that progressed tonight make you feel a lot better. And one thought I did have, I shared this with you guys a couple of days ago, and I did it on the radio, like the deal or no deal. Would you take a Sweet 16 as the end game for this team or not? At that point, as before Minnesota and just where things were at, as they go to Sweet 16 and they lose, and that's the highest they get to. Some would probably take it because, prior to tonight, and we still have to see more, it looked like a team that maybe was trending towards a very quick exit in the tournament. Eye test-wise, though, tonight with the upside, with Will Riley playing like that and KJ, that's the reason for saying no deal, right?
Just roll the dice. Yeah. And to be honest with you, after making the Elite Eight last year, just roll the dice. See what happens with this team. But, I mean, I love that we got to the point where, like, a Sweet 16 is not the end-all, be-all, but still pretty awesome. Like, just that extra week. Just that extra week to feel great about your team. Like, that's the best part. Like, so get to the Sweet 16, see what happens. But, yeah, I mean, this team obviously could lose in the first round still, even after the feel-good feelings about tonight. Indiana coach, who's your top three on the board? As
I've told you guys, Chris Beard would be my guy.
Understandable, because that would work. It would work as long as you're fine with the background, knowing it's sketchy. Yeah, he would win a ton of games there.
I would personally be willing to put him above Dusty May. I'm not. Should I put Brad Stevens even on the list?
No. It's the GM of the Boston freaking Celtics. Why would we want to coach Indiana?
Billy Donovan? No.
Got to think about, hey, I got Jason Tatum for the next 10 years of my franchise. How can I win 5 more titles?
Right.
Come on. Like, that tier of candidate they got to stop thinking about. The not getting Jay Wright out of retirement, right? If Scott Drew's not going to Kentucky, I can't see Scott Drew going there.
Nate Oates, same thing.
Nate Oates, same thing. Like, listen, Indiana's a really good job. You got a lot of resources there. It's also a lot of pressure there. Like, it's better to be the head coach, I think, at Alabama or Auburn. So Bruce Pearl, I don't see why you go there. I think it's better to be the head coach of Michigan. To be honest, I think Dusty May, the only reason he would go there is because he loves Indiana. But, man, there's no pressure at some of these places. Just make tournaments, entertain them in February and March before spring ball starts. And you can win a ton of games. You can go to national championships. And Michigan and Ohio State have been there more recently than Indiana, right? Like, Indiana's been a mid-program here recently. I think they should be better than that. But I just think that top-tier candidate, probably not. For Chris Beard, yes, you can get. I also think they just need a good ball coach, Derek. Like, just get somebody who knows how to build a roster that works together, spends the money wisely, and is a really good coach. So, if I'm a Micah Shrewsbury guy. I understand his resume is not up to par for probably what they want. I think he'd do well there. But someone like Ben McCollum at Drake, like, I would look into that guy because his schemes, his analytics, all of that are really good. And you see what happened to your football program when you went and just got a good ball coach, right? Yeah. Like, that's how Indiana needs that.
TJ Altenberger, really good ball coach. Although Iowa State's probably going to try to give as many reasons as they can to make sure he's continuing to be their ball coach. Would they have a conversation with Mick Cronin at some point as they get down their pecking order? I don't know. That would be interesting ultimately, but I think Chris Beard would take it. I think he should offer. I think he would be a home run. I think he's I don't know if safe is the right word in terms of it feels like both sides it makes sense in a lot of ways. I think with him, he's similar to Brad in that he's got you can talk about the JUCO background, the building rosters every year. He's done really well in the portal before, and prior to the Texas stuff at the very end, obviously he was regarded as one of the top 5, top 10 coaches in the game. And I think you can sell any kind of like warts as far as that goes. I think he's already back in the second chance. And
that's the great part. You didn't take the first chance on him, right? Kind of rehabbed at Ole Miss, got through that. They took all the bullets for that, and then you wouldn't take as many. Now you'd still take bullets for it, but
you would.
If I'm Dusty May, I'm not taking that job. To be honest with you, like I feel better about what I got at Michigan.
I think the only thing you could probably really hammer is, NIL. It seems like Indiana. It's pretty widely known. This was the highest price roster in the league this year. Didn't lead ultimately to the best results. Michigan, as you get into revenue sharing, like should not be hurting, obviously, for anything. But football,
they might put more money percentage-wise into basketball. Like I think Illinois will probably put a little bit more into basketball than some other teams. I think Brett Bielema will be okay with it. Just get me close to what some of these other programs are. There's no doubt. Like now Cignetti, I think Cignetti's going to have a huge portion of it, but I do think Indiana is going to put more into their roster than a lot of Big Ten teams.
That would be an argument if you're Indiana trying to talk to Dusty May about it, but the pressure is obviously on the other side. I don't feel like, and we were talking about this, I think, recently, but when you have like a true bred basketball school, the Illinois fans want to argue about that recently. I think it applies to Illinois too, versus like a football. I don't know. They don't hit the hot button as fast. The emotions of every loss, I think aren't exacerbated as much as they are for a place with Indiana's type of prestige and expectation. Same with Illinois basketball in contrast to maybe an Ohio State or a Michigan or a Texas or whatever it might be.
Like I think Illinois and Indiana are great jobs, but I also think they're complicated because of that energy, that passion of the fan base can go both ways. And I think that's what made it complicated when you went and got John Gross. A lot of people passed up because of that fishbowl and the expectations of it. And then you found a great one in Brad Underwood, right? But like it wasn't some of the biggest names in the sport at that time. You got a guy who'd only been at the high major level 1 year, had only been a head coach for 4 years, and you went and got a good ball coach. That's why I kind of like doing that. But I think for some people, they want that Indiana thing. I think for most coaches, they'd rather – I think have Michigan or Ohio State higher, to be honest with you, or maybe even an Oregon. Might be even higher on some of those just because of, you're going to have resources, but you're not going to have the pressure of a place and maybe ridiculous expectations like Indiana. But I get why Indiana does, because they have one of the greatest coaches of all time in Bob Knight and have 5 national titles hanging from there. But it's been a long time since Bob Knight coached there. And Tom Crean did some good things there, and it wasn't good enough for them. And I understand why the expectation's so high there, but that's why some people might not see it as the elite job.
Tom Crean's kind of like the Bears' Lovie Smith, right? A little bit, ultimately, in terms of
take it back.
That guy, ooh, yeah. But Beard, by the way, people don't know, has the connection to Knight from 6 years as associate head coach at Texas Tech. I think that would play well to some of those boosters that would care a lot about that. But they'll have some good options. I'd be surprised if they get caught settling too much or an underwhelming type of hire. I know someone just brought this up, but
just go get the Beard. Don't try and woo Brad Stevens for a week and waste your time.
Yeah, for sure. I know someone mentions Chris Collins as a really good ball coach. He's a really good ball coach, for sure. I don't know that
those resources.
Yeah, I don't know if he'd be kind of like sexy enough for Indiana fans. It'd work, yeah. I think it would work.
Give him that talent. I think he could do it. Last thing, Derek, what's your Super Bowl pick?
I took the Chiefs. I hate it. Mahomes. I'm just going to say it's Jordan in the 90s, and I'm not – unfortunately, I was a young kid. I was a Bulls fan, but a young kid. And it's just one of those inevitable stories. I think it'll be a close game, and then the hero swoops in and does what the hero does. So that's where I'm landing.
It's the total respect. I'm with you. I feel like it's going to be a close game, but in the end, I'm going to go with the quarterback. And, Jalen Hurts is a really good player. Patrick Mahomes maybe the greatest of all time. And if he wins this one, the argument's going to really get up there. Andy Reid's a great coach. Like Philly's roster is insane. Their GM is phenomenal in what he's been able to do. So I can see the Eagles winning, but I just have to side with the Chiefs. So sorry to be boring. I know most of the country is rooting for the Eagles in this one. All right, Derek Piper, appreciate you as always. I know you'll have some player grades from this. I'll have a column, some notes as well from this. But everybody, thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Thanks for watching on YouTube as well. Hit that like button, subscribe to us, hit that notifications bell as well. For Derek Piper, I'm Jeremy Werner. Everybody have a great night. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.